She never imagined a crisp autumn morning at Silver Creek Ranch would turn into a battle for survival. The rumble of pickup trucks shattered the peaceful dawn at the remote Montana homestead, and in mere moments, Sarah Mitchell would find herself cornered by the most ruthless land grabbers in 3 counties. The Dixon brothers weren't known for taking no for an answer, and as their ringleader stalked toward her with cold eyes, she could feel time slowing to a crawl. But what these dangerous men didn't know, what no one in Silver Creek Valley knew, was that beneath her quiet rancher's wife exterior lay one of the most feared bounty hunters west of the Mississippi. And some mistakes come with a price tag these men couldn't afford to pay. The morning frost clings to the tall grass surrounding Silver Creek Ranch, where the gentle lowing of cattle mingles with the soft whicker of horses in their paddocks. Sarah Mitchell moves with practiced ease through her morning routine, her breath visible in the cold mountain air as she checks the fences along the eastern pasture. At 35, she carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who has found peace in the solitude of ranch life, her weathered boots marking familiar paths through the autumn-touched landscape. The ranch sprawls across 300 acres of Montana wilderness, a testament to generations of Mitchell family stewardship. The main house, built from local timber and stone, stands as a sentinel overlooking rolling pastures that stretch toward distant mountains. This morning, like every morning for the past 3 years since she married James Mitchell, Sarah takes comfort in the simple rhythms of ranch life, so different from her former existence. The sound of approaching vehicles breaks through her reverie. Sarah's hand pauses on the fence post she's checking, her keen ears picking up the distinct rumble of multiple trucks moving too fast down their private access road. Through the morning mist, she catches glimpses of dust clouds rising above the tree line, accompanied by the aggressive rev of engines that speak more of threat than friendly visit. 3 mud-splattered pickup trucks emerge from the tree line, their tires throwing gravel as they skid to a stop in front of the main house. Sarah watches from her position by the fence line, her body instinctively shifting into a stance that would seem casual to any observer, but leaves her ready for whatever comes next. She counts 6 men climbing out of the vehicles, led by Wade Dixon himself, a man whose reputation for violence and intimidation has spread through 3 counties like wildfire. Inside the ranch house, Thomas Cooper, their elderly ranch hand, peers through the window with growing concern. His gnarled fingers reach for the phone, dialing a number he knows by heart. Out in the northern pasture, James Mitchell is working with their prize stallion when his phone buzzes in his pocket. Something in Thomas's voice makes him immediately begin saddling his horse. "Sarah's alone at the main house," Thomas says, his voice tight with worry. "The Dixon boys just rolled up, all of them, including Wade. They're headed straight for her." "I'll be there as fast as I can," James replies, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his heart. Just make sure she doesn't. What? Never mind. I'm coming." Back at the house, Wade Dixon approaches Sarah with the casual arrogance of a man used to taking what he wants. His boots crunch on the gravel, spurs jingling with each step. At 6'4", he towers over Sarah's slight frame, using his bulk to cast a deliberate shadow across her face. "Well, what do we have here?" Wade's voice carries across the yard, dripping with false courtesy. "The pretty little rancher's wife, out all alone." Sarah continues checking the fence post, her movements unhurried and deliberate. "This is private property, Mr. Dixon. Unless you have business here, I'll have to ask you to leave." The other Dixon boys spread out, creating a loose semicircle around her. Their body language speaks of practiced intimidation, a dance they've performed countless times before. But there's something different in the air this morning, something they can't quite put their finger on. The woman before them shows no sign of the fear they're accustomed to inspiring. "Private property," Wade repeats, running his hand along the top rail of the fence. Funny you should mention that. See, we've been thinking about property lines lately. Thinking maybe some of them need adjusting. Mia finally turns to face him fully, her green eyes sharp and assessing. To the Dixon boys, she looks like any other ranch wife, worn jeans, flannel shirt, work boots dusted with prairie soil. They see what they expect to see, what she's carefully crafted for them to notice. They don't see the way she's already marked distances, evaluated angles, noted weapons poorly concealed under heavy jackets. They don't recognize the stillness in her stance for what it really is, the calm before a storm. From the main house, Thomas watches with growing anxiety, his weathered face creased with concern. He knows James is coming, but he also knows it's a 20-minute ride from the north pasture, even at full gallop. What he doesn't know, what none of them know, is that Mia Mitchell isn't worried about the time. In fact, she's counting on having just enough of it to handle this situation her way before her husband arrives and complicates matters with his protective instincts. The morning sun breaks through the clouds, casting harsh shadows across the yard as Wade Dixon steps closer, his confidence growing with each movement. He's about to discover that some shadows hide deeper secrets than others, and some quiet mornings on Montana ranches hold lessons that come with a bounty all their own. Wade Dixon circles Mia like a wolf sizing up its prey, his boots leaving heavy imprints in the morning frost. Behind him, his brothers Clint and Marcus exchange knowing smirks, while their 3 hired hands, men with hard eyes and harder reputations, move to block any path of retreat. The peaceful sounds of the ranch have gone silent, as if nature itself holds its breath in anticipation of what's coming. "You know what your husband's problem is," Wade says, reaching out to run a calloused finger along the fence post Mia had been inspecting. "He doesn't understand how things work out here, been holding on to this prime piece of land, acting like it's his birthright when there are others who could put it to better use." Mia takes a measured step back, not in fear, but in calculation, giving herself more room to maneuver. Her eyes never leave Wade's face, even as she tracks the movements of the others in her peripheral vision. "The Mitchell family has worked this land for 4 generations, Mr. Dixon. They've earned every acre." Clint Dixon spits a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Earned?" His laugh is sharp and cruel. "Way we see it, old James Mitchell's been living on borrowed time. Those water rights he's so proud of, that grazing permit for the North Valley, all that could change with the right paperwork in the right hands. Or the wrong accident at the U.S. Wrong time," Marcus adds, his hand resting meaningfully on the bulge beneath his jacket. Mia's pulse remains steady, her breathing controlled. These men are used to intimidation, used to the power that comes from making others afraid. They expect her to tremble, to call for help, to show the fear they've grown accustomed to inspiring in others. Instead, she reaches down and casually checks the laces on her boot, a movement that makes Wade step back instinctively, though he doesn't understand why. "Those permits are legally registered," Mia says, straightening up. "The water rights were settled in court 20 years ago. If you're having trouble understanding the paperwork, I'm sure our lawyer would be happy to explain it again." One of the hired hands, a scarred man they call Rattler, moves closer, his boots crunching on the frosty ground. "Lawyers ain't got nothing to do with this, lady. This is about what's practical, about what's going to happen, not what some paper says should happen." Through the window of the ranch house, Thomas Cooper watches with growing alarm. He's known Mia for only 3 years, since she married James, but something about her stance makes him pause with his hand on the phone. There's a stillness to her that seems familiar, though he can't quite place why. Wade steps closer to Mia, using his height to loom over her. "Here's how this is going to work, Mrs. Mitchell. You're going to go inside, pack a few bags, and tell that husband of yours it's time to sell. We've even got papers drawn up, making it all nice and legal-like. Fair market value, even though we both know this land ain't worth what it used to be. And if we refuse? Mia asks, her voice carrying across the yard with unexpected authority. Then things get complicated, Wade says, his friendly facade cracking slightly. Ranching's a dangerous business. Accidents happen, equipment fails, fires start. Would be a shame if something happened to those prize horses James breeds. Or to James himself. Mia's eyes narrow slightly, and for just a moment something flickers across her face. Not fear, but something darker, more dangerous. The hired hands shift uneasily, though they don't understand why. Their instincts, honed by years of violence, are trying to tell them something their conscious minds refuse to acknowledge. "You're threatening my husband," Mia says each word. Precise and measured, it's not a question. Wade's smile widens, mistaking her careful enunciation for barely controlled fear. "Threatening? No, ma'am. Just explaining facts of life out here in the real world. Strong take what they want. Weak learn to live with it." Inside the house, Thomas has abandoned the phone and moved to the gun cabinet. His arthritic fingers fumble with the lock as he watches Mia stand alone against 6 men. But something makes him hesitate, something about the way she holds herself, the way she seems to be waiting rather than afraid. "Last chance," Wade says, reaching into his jacket to pull out a thick envelope. "Papers are right here. All James needs to do is sign. We've even brought a notary. Rattler here got himself a license just for occasions like this." The men laugh, but there's an edge to it now, a growing unease they can't quite explain. Maya looks at the envelope, then back at Wade's face. "You seem like an educated man, Mr. Dixon. Tell me something. Before you came out here today, did you do your homework? Did you look into who you were dealing with?" "Dealing with?" Wade scoffs. "We know everything we need to know about James. Mitchell, 4th-generation rancher, too proud for his own good, married himself a pretty little thing from out of state 3 years ago. What else is there to know?" Mia's lips curve into a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "You really should have done your homework, especially about that pretty little thing from out of state." Something in her tone makes Wade take another instinctive step back. For the first time, he really looks at her, not at what he expects to see, but at what's actually in front of him. He notices the way she stands, balanced and ready, the way her eyes constantly track movements, distances, angles, the way she seems entirely too calm for someone supposedly intimidated by 6 dangerous men. "Who are you?" he asks. And there's a new note in his voice, the first tremor of uncertainty. In the distance, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announces James Mitchell's return, but Mia knows the situation will be resolved long before her husband arrives. She's made sure of that from the moment she recognized Wade Dixon's truck coming down their road. "Me," Mia says quietly. "I'm just a rancher's wife. But you might want to ask yourself why a bounty hunter with 15 years of experience and over 200 captures to her name would choose to retire to a quiet ranch in Montana. And then you might want to ask yourself if today is really the day you want to find out." Wade's face contorts with a mixture of disbelief and growing concern, the envelope in his hand suddenly forgotten. The morning sun catches on Mia's wedding ring as she shifts her stance ever so slightly, and for the first time the Dixon brothers notice how deliberately she moves, how each small adjustment seems calculated with military precision. "A bounty hunter?" Wade forces a laugh, but it comes out hollow. "You expect us to believe that? Some rancher's wife who spends her days tending horses and mending fences." Mia remains motionless, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension building in the air. "Believe what you want, Mr. Dixon. But right now, you're trespassing on private property and making threats against my husband. Those are just the legal violations I can see without looking too hard." Inside the ranch house, Thomas Cooper has abandoned the gun cabinet, his weathered face pressed against the window as he watches the scene unfold. Something about Mia's words triggers a distant memory, A news article he'd read years ago about a legendary bounty hunter known only as the Shadow. The piece had mentioned how she'd disappeared from the circuit 3 years ago, right around the time Mia had appeared in Silver Creek Valley. Clint Dixon steps forward, his hand drifting toward his waistband. "You trying to scare us with fairy tales, lady? Because it ain't working. We came here to do business, and business is getting done one way or another. Your brother Clint," Mia says, her voice carrying across the yard with unexpected authority, "wanted in Idaho for aggravated assault, isn't he? Never could prove it was him who put that ranch hand in the hospital last spring. And Marcus, that outstanding warrant in Wyoming for livestock theft, might interest the local sheriff." The color drains from Marcus's face as Mia continues, her green eyes never leaving Wade's increasingly uncertain expression. "As for your hired help, Rattler there has 2 warrants out in Nevada, though he probably thinks they're still sealed. The others, well, let's just say I've had some slow evenings to look into everyone's background since you started causing trouble in the valley." Wade takes another step back, his boots scraping against gravel. "You're bluffing, trying to buy time until your husband gets back." "Am I?" Mia's smile is sharp as a blade. Joseph Rattler Martinez, born August 15, 1985 in Reno, served time in Nevada State Prison for armed robbery before escaping during a transfer in 2019. There's a $40,000 bounty on him right now. Would you like me to continue with the rest of your crew? Rattler's scarred face goes pale, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun hidden beneath his jacket. "Boss, something ain't right here. Nobody's supposed to know about that transfer." The other hired hands exchange, nervous glances, their earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew. They've spent years cultivating a reputation for violence, but something about the way this seemingly ordinary ranch wife catalogues their crimes makes their palms sweat. "Here's what's going to happen," Mia says, her voice dropping to a tone that commands attention. "You're going to get in your trucks and leave this property. You're going to forget about whatever plans you had for forcing us to sell. And you're going to pray, I decide that keeping our ranch safe is more important than collecting on any of those outstanding warrants." Wade's face darkens with rage, his pride warring with his growing uncertainty. "You think you can threaten us? 6 against 1, and you're standing there making threats? Numbers don't mean much if you don't know how to use them," Mia replies calmly. "Want me to demonstrate?" The sound of approaching hoofbeats grows louder, but Mia knows she needs to end this before James arrives. Her husband understands her past, accepts it, but he's never seen this side of her. The predator beneath the peaceful exterior. She'd prefer to keep it that way. "Boss," Rattler says urgently, "maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Wade snaps, but his voice shakes slightly. "She's playing mind games, probably looked up some information online, trying to scare us. Well, it ain't working, lady. We came here to do business and—" "The scar on your right shoulder," Mia interrupts, quietly. "The one you got in that bar fight in Casper 5 years ago. The report says you pulled a knife on an off-duty cop, but there weren't enough witnesses willing to testify. I remember reading that file. Almost took the contract myself, but I was busy tracking that bank crew through Oregon." Wade's hand unconsciously moves to his shoulder, his face draining of color. That incident had been sealed, buried under layers of legal maneuvering and witness intimidation. The only people who knew the details were the cop, his lawyer, and the Shadow, he whispers, recognition finally dawning. "They said you could find anyone, anywhere, said you never gave up once you took a contract, but you disappeared 3 years ago, right after that business with the Carson gang." Mia's expression doesn't change, but something cold and professional enters her voice. "I didn't disappear, Mr. Dixon. I retired. Found something worth settling down for. And now you're threatening that something, which means you've made this professional in a way you really don't want." The morning wind carries the scent of sage and prairie grass across the yard, a reminder of the peace that existed before the Dixon brothers arrived. But now that peace hangs by a thread, balanced on the edge of violence, as 6 men who thought they were predators slowly realize they've wandered into the territory of something far more dangerous than themselves. Through the ranch house window, Thomas Cooper watches with growing fascination as the dynamic in the yard shifts. The Dixon boys, who've terrorized 3 counties with their brand of frontier justice, seem to be losing their swagger. Their boots scrape against gravel as they unconsciously back away from the petite woman they'd come to intimidate. "You know what else I remember about your file, Wade?" Mia's voice carries across the yard, steady as a heartbeat. "How you like to prey on people who can't fight back. Widows, elderly ranchers, families down on their luck. You pick your targets, carefully. People without resources, without connections, without the means to resist." Wade's face flushes red, but there's a tremble in his gun hand that wasn't there before. "You don't know anything about me." "Quarter Bend Ranch, 2019, Mia recites from memory. "Elderly couple, 3rd-generation farmers. Their grandson found them terrified in their own home after your business negotiation." "Paradise Valley, 2020, widow with 3 kids, forced to sell at a quarter of market value after mysterious accidents kept happening to her livestock." The hired hands exchange increasingly nervous glances. They'd heard rumors about the Shadow, how she could reconstruct a criminal's entire history, how she seemed to know everything about her targets before they even knew she was hunting them. But those were just stories, whispered in bars and around campfires, weren't they? "That's ancient history," Wade snarls, but his voice lacks conviction. "We're here about the present, about this ranch." "You're here," Mia corrects him quietly, "because you made the same mistake you always make. You saw what you wanted to see, a simple rancher's wife, an easy target. You never stopped to ask yourself why someone like James Mitchell, with his family's reputation for good sense, would marry a stranger from out of state after just 6 months of courtship." Inside the house, Thomas's eyes widen as pieces start falling into place. The way Mia always seemed to know when trouble was coming. To the valley, her insistence on upgrading the ranch's security systems, the mysterious calls she sometimes took in her home office, speaking in coded phrases he couldn't understand. "James married me because we fell in love," Mia continues, her voice softening for a moment. "But he also married me because he knew what was coming, knew that sooner or later people like you would try to take what his family spent generations building. He just didn't know it would be the infamous Dixon Brothers who'd make the attempt." Clint Dixon's hand inches closer to his concealed weapon. "You're awful full of information for someone who claims to be retired." "Old habits," Mia shrugs, the gesture somehow making her seem more dangerous, not less. "I keep track of potential threats. It's what kept me alive in my previous line of work. For instance, I know about the gun you're reaching for, the same .357 you used in that gas station robbery in Idaho, the one that's still considered an open case." Clint's hand freezes, his face going pale. That case had been buried so deep, he'd almost forgotten about it himself. The growing sound of hoofbeats announces James's imminent arrival, but Mia isn't finished. She needs these men to understand exactly what they've walked into. "The thing about retiring," she says, taking a single step forward that makes all 6 men take an instinctive step back, "is that it gives you time to study, to really dig into the histories of people who might cause trouble. I've spent 3 years learning everything there is to know about the Dixon brothers and their operation. Every crime, every scheme, every bit of dirt you thought was buried too deep to find." "Boss," Rattler's voice shakes slightly, "this ain't what we signed up for. You said this was just going to be a simple intimidation job. Didn't say nothing about dealing with the Shadow." Wade turns on him sharply. "Shut your mouth. She's one woman playing mind games. We're 6 armed men, or did you forget how to count?" "Tell me, Wade," Mia's voice cuts through their argument like a blade. Did you ever wonder why they called me the Shadow? It wasn't just because I could track anyone anywhere. It was because by the time my targets knew I was coming, it was already too late. Their options were already gone. Their plans were already unraveling, just like what's happening right now. The morning sun has risen higher, burning away the last wisps of fog. In its clear light, the Dixon brothers' fearsome reputation seems to be evaporating just as quickly. Wade stands frozen, the envelope containing their fraudulent sale papers, crumpled in his white-knuckled grip. "You're saying," Marcus speaks up, his voice hoarse, "you've been planning for this all this time?" "Planning? No." Mia shakes her head slightly. "I've been hoping you'd be smarter than this. Hoping you'd hear the rumors about what happened to the Carson gang when they tried something similar in Oregon and decide Silver Creek Valley wasn't worth the risk. But since you insisted on coming here, on threatening my home, my husband—" Her voice hardens. "Well, let's just say I've been prepared for this possibility since the day I said, 'I do.'" The distant hoofbeats grow louder, but now they sound more like a countdown than approaching rescue. Mia shifts her weight slightly, and somehow that small movement makes all 6 men tense, as if she'd drawn a weapon. They're beginning to understand that they're not facing a simple rancher's wife. They're facing someone who spent 15 years hunting the most dangerous criminals in the western United States. Someone who'd retired not because she had to, but because she chose to. And they've just threatened everything she chose to retire. For Wade Dixon's facade of confidence finally cracks, showing the fear beneath. His eyes dart between his brothers and hired hands, seeing his carefully constructed plan crumbling around him. The morning sun catches on Mia's wedding ring as she takes another deliberate step forward, her movements liquid and precise. "Last warning," Mia says, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years of hunting dangerous men. "Leave now, forget about this ranch, and I'll forget about those outstanding warrants. Stay, and I start making calls to some old friends who'd be very interested in your current location. You think we're scared of some phone calls?" Wade snarls, but his bravado rings hollow. "We've dealt with law enforcement before. Money talks in these parts." Mia's smile is cold as Montana winter. "Who said anything about law enforcement? I'm talking about other bounty hunters. The ones who've been waiting years to find the Dixon brothers in a vulnerable position." "Right. Now there are at least 4 teams I know of who'd drop everything and be here within hours if I sent up the signal." Rattler takes a halting step backward, his scarred face twisted with anxiety. "Boss, she ain't bluffing. I heard stories about how the Shadow operated. She never worked alone. Always had a network, people waiting in the wings." "Shut up about the Shadow," Wade shouts, his composure completely shattered. "She's one woman, one retired bounty hunter playing mind games. Tell that to the Carson gang," Mia replies quietly. "Oh wait, you can't. They're all serving 20 to life in federal prison. Amazing how quickly they turned on each other when they realized they were surrounded. Just like you're about to be if you don't make the smart choice." The hired hands exchanged nervous glances, their earlier confidence replaced by growing panic. They'd signed up for a simple intimidation job, not a confrontation with one of the most legendary bounty hunters in Western history. Thomas watches from the window as Mia reaches slowly into her pocket. The Dixon boys flinch, hands moving toward their weapons, but she simply pulls out a phone. Right now, there are 4 text messages drafted on this phone. One press of a button, and every major bounty hunter from here to the Mexican border knows exactly where to find you. "You're bluffing," Wade says, but his voice cracks. "You wouldn't risk a firefight on your precious ranch." "Risk?" Mia's laugh is sharp and without humor. "Look around you, Wade. Really look. Notice anything strange about the way the morning light hits the barn roof, the odd shadows near the corral, the way the wind moves the grass in patterns that don't quite match?" The men's eyes dart around nervously, suddenly seeing their surroundings in a new light. What they'd dismissed as normal ranch features now seem ominous, potentially hiding any number of threats. 3 years is a long time to prepare a battlefield, Mia continues calmly, especially when you have connections to every major security contractor west of the Mississippi. Remember Jeremy Carson. Before he went to prison, he specialized in setting up exactly these kinds of security systems. He owed me a favor. Several, actually. Marcus Dixon's face goes pale. The Carson gang's security expert? The one who could turn any property into a fortress? The same. Mia nods. He did excellent work here before they caught him in Oregon. Would you like a demonstration of what this ranch can do if threatened? Wade's hand trembles as he reaches for his gun, but Maya's voice stops him cold. I wouldn't. The motion sensors are already tracking every one of you. One wrong move, and things get very loud and very bright. Ever experienced military-grade flashbangs, Wade? They're particularly effective in wide-open spaces like this. The sound of approaching hoofbeats grows louder, but now it seems almost superfluous. The Dixon brothers' attempt at intimidation has transformed into something else entirely, a desperate search for a way out of a trap they never saw coming. Boss, one of the hired hands calls out, his voice shaking. I ain't getting paid enough for this, not for going up against the Shadow and her whole network. Neither am I, another agrees, already backing toward the trucks. You said this was just going to be some simple ranch acquisition. Didn't say nothing about bounty hunters and security systems. Wade stands frozen, watching his carefully constructed power play dissolve into chaos. His reputation, built on years of bullying and intimidation, means nothing in the face of Maya's cold professionalism. For the first time in his life, he's facing someone who isn't just unafraid. She's been methodically preparing for this confrontation since before he even knew she existed. Time's running out, Mia says, her thumb hovering over her phone. Those messages go out, and every bounty hunter in 4 states will be heading this way. Your choice, Wade. Leave now with your freedom, or stay and find out exactly why the Carson gang fell apart so completely when they faced a similar decision. The morning wind carries the scent of sage and prairie grass, but now it seems to whisper warnings. The Dixon brothers, who came to Silver Creek Ranch expecting to find an easy target, are beginning to understand that they haven't just threatened a rancher's wife. They've walked into a carefully laid trap set by someone who spent 15 years hunting men exactly like them. And as James Mitchell's horse appears on the ridge, they're about to learn that some traps don't need to be sprung to be effective. Sometimes the mere knowledge of their existence is enough to break even the most hardened criminals. Quick pause before we continue with this thrilling tale. Where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode will leave you absolutely speechless. The morning sun climbs higher over Silver Creek Ranch, casting stark shadows across faces that have lost all trace of their earlier arrogance. Wade Dixon's hand hovers near his weapon, his knuckles white with tension, but Mia's calm voice cuts through his indecision. You seem like a gambling man, Wade, she says, her thumb still poised over her phone. So let's talk odds. Even if you manage to outdraw me, which given your history with firearms is doubtful, you've got Jeremy Carson's security system to deal with. Then there's my husband arriving with what I'm sure is every ranch hand within riding distance. And that's before we factor in how quickly professional bounty hunters can mobilize when there's this much money at stake. Inside the ranch house, Thomas Cooper watches the scene unfold with growing amazement. He's lived in Silver Creek Valley his entire life, seen his share of confrontations, but nothing like this. The legendary Dixon brothers, who've terrorized 3 counties with impunity, look like schoolboys caught in an act of vandalism. You don't know what you're doing, Wade manages, though his voice lacks conviction. This territory, these ranches, they belong to whoever's strong enough to take them. Mia's laugh is sharp and without humor. Strong enough? Let me explain something about real strength, Wade. It's not about how many men you can gather, or how many guns you can carry. Real strength, she gestures to the ranch around them. It's about building something, protecting it, creating a home worth defending. Rattler takes another step back, his eyes darting between the barn roof and the distant tree line. Boss, she ain't like the others. This ain't some scared rancher's wife we're pushing around. This is the Shadow, the one who brought down the Hernandez cartel single-handed. That wasn't single-handed, Mia corrects mildly. I had help. Quite a lot of it, actually. The same kind of help that's just waiting for my signal right now. The kind that can turn Silver Creek Valley into a very uncomfortable place for the Dixon brothers to operate. The hired hands continue their slow retreat toward the trucks, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. They've heard stories about the Shadow's network, how she could mobilize dozens of bounty hunters within hours, how she seemed to have eyes and ears everywhere. For 20 years, Wade says suddenly, his voice tight with desperation. 20 years we've been running these valleys, built everything from nothing, and you think you can just... Built? Mia's voice carries a sharp edge now. Is that what you call it? Terrorizing honest ranchers, forcing people off land their families have worked for generations? That's not building, Wade. That's stealing. And if there's one thing I learned in 15 years of hunting men like you, thieves eventually lose everything they've taken. The sound of hoofbeats grows louder, accompanied now by the rumble of approaching trucks. James Mitchell isn't coming alone, and everyone in the yard knows it. The Dixon brothers' window of opportunity is closing fast. Boss, Marcus says urgently, we need to go, now, before... Before what? Wade spins on his brother, his face contorted with rage and fear. Before she calls her bounty hunter friends, before the whole valley comes running to help, we're the Dixon brothers. We don't run from threats. No, Mia agrees. Quietly, you don't run from threats, but I'm not threatening you, Wade. I'm giving you a choice. The same choice I gave the Carson gang, the Hernandez cartel, and every other criminal organization that thought they were untouchable. Leave now. Leave us in peace. And you get to keep your freedom. Stay. She lets the sentence hang in the morning air. The distant sound of trucks grows louder, and now multiple riders appear on the ridge. James Mitchell leads them, his normally gentle face set in hard lines. Behind him come at least a dozen ranch hands from neighboring properties, all of them armed, all of them tired of living under the Dixon brothers' shadow. Times change, Wade, Mia continues, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard. The days of men like you forcing your will on others, they're over. This valley, these people, they're not your prey anymore. They're a community, and communities protect their own. Clint grabs his brother's arm. Wade, we got to go now, before she makes those calls, before we lose everything. Wade stands frozen, watching as his carefully built empire of intimidation crumbles around him. The morning sun, now high in the sky, seems to mock him with its brightness, illuminating every crack in his facade of power. Your call, Mia says softly, her thumb still hovering over her phone. But make it fast. James will be here in about 30 seconds, and he's a lot less forgiving than I am when it comes to people threatening our home. The wind carries the sound of more vehicles approaching, and Wade Dixon, the man who's terrorized 3 counties into submission, finally faces a truth he's never had to confront before. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who've chosen to retire, who've found something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. And he's just threatened everything the Shadow chose to retire for. The crack of a twig beneath someone's nervous boot echoes across the yard, and in that moment, everything changes. Wade Dixon's hand moves toward his gun with the desperate speed of a man who's never learned another way. But before his fingers can close around the grip, before any of his men can even register what's happening, Mia Mitchell becomes something else entirely. Her movement is liquid grace, years of training, and instinct flowing together in perfect harmony. One moment she's standing still, the next she's inside Wade's guard, her hand locked around his wrist with mechanical precision. The gun he never fully drew clatters to the ground, and Wade finds himself staring at the sky, his back hitting the dirt with a force that drives the air from his lungs. "That was a mistake," Mia says quietly, her boot resting lightly on Wade's throat. The other Dixon boys freeze, hands halfway to their weapons, as they finally see what they should have recognized from the beginning. The way she moves, the absolute economy of motion, the predatory grace that no amount of ranch work could explain. "Don't," she warns the others, her voice carrying the weight of countless successful hunts. "Your boss here just made one bad decision. Don't compound it by making another." Inside the ranch house, Thomas Cooper stands transfixed. In 3 years of watching Mia tend horses and mend fences, he's never seen this side of her. The quiet rancher's wife has vanished, replaced by something out of the stories he's heard whispered in bars. The legend of the Shadow, the bounty hunter who could take down armed men twice her size without breaking a sweat. Rattler, his face, pale beneath his scars, begins backing toward the trucks. "This is what she did to the Carson boys," he says, his voice shaking. "Took down their leader so fast nobody even saw it coming. Rest of the gang fell apart right after." "Shut up," Marcus Dixon shouts, but his hand trembles as he reaches for his weapon. Before he can draw, Mia's voice freezes him in place. "Think very carefully about your next move," she says, never taking her eyes off Wade. "Your brother here is about to learn that retired doesn't mean forgotten. The question is, how many of you want to learn that lesson alongside him?" The morning sun catches on something metallic near the barn, a brief flash that makes the hired hands flinch. They're starting to understand that Maya's earlier warnings about security systems and prepared positions weren't just threats. "You saw how fast she moved," Rattler continues, already opening his truck door. "That ain't normal. That's 15 years of hunting the worst criminals in the West. That's why they called her the Shadow. By the time you saw her, it was already too late." Wade struggles beneath Mia's boot, his face red with rage and humiliation. "Get her! What are you all waiting for? There's 6 of us." "5, Rattler corrects, climbing into his truck. "I ain't dying today. Not for this, not against her." The truck's engine roars to life, tires spitting gravel as he makes his escape. James Mitchell appears at the top of the ridge, accompanied by a dozen armed ranch hands. But Mia knows this situation will be resolved before they arrive. She can see it in the faces of the remaining men, the dawning recognition, the fear, the desperate calculation of odds that suddenly seem much worse than simple numbers would suggest. "Your reputation," Mia tells Wade, her voice casual as if they're discussing the weather. "It's built on fear, on making people think you're the biggest predator in these valleys. But there's always something bigger, Wade. Something that hunts the hunters. For 15 years that was my job, and just because I chose a quiet life doesn't mean I've forgotten how to do it." The other hired hand drops his weapon, raising his hands. "I'm out. Sorry, boss, but I ain't getting paid enough to fight the Shadow. Everyone knows what happened to the last crew that tried." Clint and Marcus exchange desperate looks, their earlier confidence completely evaporated. They've spent years cultivating a fearsome reputation, but reputation means nothing in the face of cold, professional competence. "Here's what happens next," Mia announces, her voice carrying across the yard. "I'm going to let Wade up. You're all going to get in your trucks and leave Silver Creek Valley, not just the ranch, the entire valley. Because if I see any of you around here again, I start making those calls. And trust me, there are a lot of people in my old profession who'd love to add the Dixon Brothers to their collection." The sound of approaching horses grows louder, but Mia maintains her focus on the men before her. She can see the moment their resistance breaks, can read it in their body language as years of bullying and intimidation come up against something they never expected to find on a quiet Montana ranch. The woman who took down the Carson gang, Marcus whispers, finally connecting the pieces. The one who tracked the Hernandez cartel across 4 states. And we just walked right into her territory. Mia finishes for him. Threatened her home, threatened her husband. Tell me, what do you think that makes you? Dead men, Wade chokes out from beneath her boot. But there's a new note in his voice, understanding finally of just how badly he's miscalculated. The morning wind carries the sound of more vehicles approaching, and the remaining Dixon boys face a choice that's really no choice at all. They've spent years being the wolves at everyone's door, never imagining that they'd one day wander into the den of something far more dangerous than themselves. Mia removes her boot from Wade's throat with careful precision, backing away with the fluid grace of a predator, allowing its prey one last chance to flee. Wade scrambles to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation and rage, but his eyes hold something new, real fear, perhaps for the first time in his life. Collect your weapon, Mia instructs calmly, nodding toward the gun lying in the dirt. Slowly. Remember, you're being watched from multiple positions, and not all of them are as forgiving as I am. Wade moves with exaggerated slowness, his earlier bravado completely shattered. As he bends to retrieve his gun, Mia's voice stops him again. Check the magazine first. With trembling fingers, Wade releases the magazine only to find it empty. His head snaps up, eyes wide with disbelief. How did you— 3 years, Wade, Mia says quietly. 3 years to learn every trick, every tactic men like you use. Did you really think I'd let you walk onto this property with loaded weapons? The security system didn't just track your movements. It magnetized specific zones. Your ammo's been dead weight since you crossed our property line. The remaining hired hand checks his own weapon, finding it similarly empty. Clint and Marcus do the same, their faces draining of color as they realize just how thoroughly they've been outmaneuvered. That's impossible, Marcus whispers. We checked our weapons before we came. They were loaded. Jeremy Carson's last project, before his arrest, Mia explains, a hint of professional pride in her voice. He called it the Silent Guardian. Military-grade electromagnetic pulses, focused and contained. Expensive, but worth every penny for moments exactly like this. James Mitchell and his group of ranch hands are nearly at the yard now, but Mia maintains her position, keeping the Dixon boys frozen in place with nothing more than her presence and the weight of her reputation. You've been playing with us, Wade realizes, his voice hoarse. This whole time we were never even a real threat. No, Mia agrees calmly, you weren't. But you could have been if you'd made different choices, could have been part of this community instead of trying to prey on it. Could have built something legitimate instead of stealing from others. That's the real tragedy here, Wade. You had options, you just chose the wrong ones. Inside the ranch house, Thomas Cooper watches in amazement as the most feared men in 3 counties stand helpless before a woman they'd come to intimidate. He sees now what he should have noticed years ago, the way Mia always positioned herself with clear sightlines, how she'd insisted on upgrading the ranch's security, her quiet confidence in the face of growing threats. The Carson gang, Clint says suddenly, they never had a chance either, did they? When they tried to take over that logging operation in Oregon. They made the same mistake you did, Mia replies, thought they were the biggest predators in their territory. Never stopped to consider that there might be someone watching them, studying them, learning their patterns. By the time they realized their mistake, they were already surrounded. James Mitchell rides into the yard, flanked by grim-faced ranch hands carrying rifles, but they pull up short at Maya's raised hand, understanding that this situation is already under control. Your reputation in these valleys, Mia continues, addressing the Dixon brothers, it's built on bullying people who can't fight back. But that changes today. These ranchers, these families you've terrorized, they're not afraid anymore. And without fear, men like you have no power at all. Wade looks around wildly, seeing his carefully constructed empire crumbling before his eyes. The ranch hands who've arrived with James aren't the scared farmers he's used to intimidating. They're standing tall, rifles ready, years of pent-up resistance finally finding its moment. What happens now? He asks, his voice barely a whisper. Now you leave, Mia says simply. Leave this valley, leave these people alone, because if you don't, I start making those calls. And trust me, Wade, there are a lot of bounty hunters who've been waiting years for permission to hunt the Dixon brothers. The morning sun has risen fully now, burning away the last shadows where men like the Dixons have hidden their threats and intimidation. In its clear light, they look smaller somehow, their fearsome reputation evaporating like dew. James dismounts, moving to stand beside his wife. He's known about her past since before they married, understood what she was capable of, but seeing it in action is something else entirely. The quiet woman who helps him with the horses, who's brought so much joy to his life, has just systematically dismantled the most dangerous gang in 3 counties without firing a shot. Remember this moment, Mia tells the Dixon boys as they begin their shambling retreat to their trucks. Remember what it feels like to be helpless, to have your choices taken away. Remember it the next time you think about threatening someone who seems weaker than you. Because you never know who might be watching, who might have spent years preparing for exactly that moment. The truck's engines roar to life, one by one, as the Dixon brothers and their remaining hired hand prepare to flee. But before they can, leave, Mia delivers one final warning, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years hunting men exactly like them. And Wade, if I ever hear about you threatening another ranch, another family, anywhere in this part of the country, no retirement, no quiet life, nothing will stop me from coming after you. And next time, I won't be nearly as gentle. The dust from the Dixon brothers' hasty departure slowly settles over Silver Creek Ranch, marking the end of their reign of terror and the beginning of something new. James Mitchell dismounts and walks. To his wife, his eyes filled with a mixture of love, pride, and newfound understanding. The ranch hands who came with him stand in respectful silence, witnessing the transformation of their valley's power structure in real time. 3 years, James says softly, taking Mia's hand. 3 years you've been preparing for this, haven't you? Mia's posture softens slightly, some of the predatory alertness fading as she turns to her husband. From the day you told me about the threats, about the pressure they were putting on smaller ranches, I knew it was only a matter of time before they set their sights on Silver Creek. Thomas emerges from the ranch house, his weathered face showing a new respect as he approaches. All those security upgrades you insisted on, the cameras, the new fences, it wasn't just about protecting the livestock, was it? No, Mia admits, a small smile playing at her lips. Jeremy Carson owed me more than just favors. He owed me his life. Before he went to prison, he made sure this ranch was equipped with everything I'd need if trouble came calling. The gathered ranch hands moved closer, their initial awe giving way to curiosity. Many of them have suffered under the Dixon brothers. Intimidation, watched helplessly as neighbors were forced out of their homes. Now they're seeing a new side to the quiet woman they'd known only as James Mitchell's wife. The shadow, one of them says, shaking his head in wonder. All this time, we had the shadow right here in Silver Creek Valley. My brother worked security in Wyoming, told me stories about how you tracked the Morrison gang through 3 feet of snow, caught them when everyone else had given up. Mia's expression grows distant, remembering. That was a lifetime ago. I chose this life, this place, because I wanted something different, something worth protecting, instead of just hunting those who would destroy. James squeezes her hand. And now everyone knows exactly how well you can protect it. A truck appears on the horizon, Rattler returning alone. He parks at a respectful distance and approaches with his hands raised, his scarred face showing a strange mix of fear and respect. "Mrs. Mitchell," he calls out, stopping well short of the group. I needed to come back and say something." Mia watches him carefully, her posture still ready despite his apparent surrender. "Say it." "I've run with a lot of crews, seen a lot of tough people," Rattler begins, his voice rough with emotion. "But what you did today, showing mercy when you could have destroyed them, giving them a chance to walk away, I've never seen anything like it." "Mercy isn't weakness," Mia replies quietly. "Sometimes it's the strongest choice you can make." Rattler nods, struggling with his next words. "The bounty on my head. I know you could collect it, right here, right now. But instead, you're letting me choose? Everyone deserves a chance to choose a better path," Mia says. "Even men who've made the wrong choices before. The question is, what are you going to do with that chance?" The gathered ranchers watch in amazement as tears begin to roll down Rattler's scarred cheeks. "I want out," he says hoarsely. "Out of this life, out of running. Been doing it so long, I forgot there could be another way." Mia studies him for a long moment, reading the truth in his broken posture, the genuine desire for change in his eyes. "There's a program in Idaho," she says finally, "run by an old friend of mine. They help people who want to leave this life behind, start fresh. If you're serious, I can make a call." "Why?" Rattler asks, his voice cracking. "Why would you help me after everything?" "Because 15 years of hunting taught me something important," Mia replies. "The worst criminals aren't the ones who make mistakes or bad choices. They're the ones who refuse to change, even when given the chance. You came back. That says something about who you really are." James steps forward, his rancher's practicality coming to the fore. "We're always looking for honest hands here in the valley, people who know the life but want something better. Once you've straightened yourself out, there might be a place for you." The morning sun has climbed high now, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible just hours ago. Ranch hands standing shoulder to shoulder with a former criminal, all of them united by the possibility of transformation that Mia Mitchell has shown them. "The Dixon Brothers," one of the ranchers asks, "will they really stay away?" "They will," Mia says with quiet certainty, "because now they know what they're really dealing with. Not just me, but all of you, standing together. Communities that unite against bullies become stronger than any gang." Thomas looks out over the valley, his old eyes seeing it with new appreciation. "Everything's going to change now, isn't it?" "It already has," Mia replies, watching Rattler climb back into his truck, heading toward the possibility of a new life. The Dixon brothers' power wasn't in their guns or their threats. It was in making everyone believe they were helpless to resist. Today showed everyone, that no one is ever truly helpless when they stand together. The morning wind carries the scent of sage and promise across Silver Creek Ranch, where a new chapter is beginning. The legend of the Shadow has transformed into something else, not just a story of hunting criminals, but one of protecting community, of showing even the most hardened men that change is possible, that mercy can be stronger than fear. The weeks following the confrontation at Silver Creek Ranch bring changes that ripple through the entire valley. The Dixon brothers' reign of terror becomes a fading memory as ranchers who once lived in fear begin to stand tall again. Properties that had been abandoned under threat of violence see new life as families return. Encouraged by the story of how one woman's strength inspired an entire community to find its courage, Mia Mitchell returns to her daily routine, tending horses, mending fences, building the life she chose when she left her old one behind. But now there's a difference in how people see her. The quiet rancher's wife is still there, but so is something else. A reminder that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful protectors are the ones who choose peace until peace is no longer an option. Word spreads through neighboring counties about what happened that morning. The tale grows with each telling, how the shadow came out of retirement for one last stand, not to hunt criminals, but to protect a community. How she gave even the most hardened men a chance at redemption, proving that true strength lies not just in defeating enemies, but in showing them a better path. Rattler returns 3 months later, clean-shaven and clear-eyed after completing the rehabilitation program. James Mitchell gives him a chance, starting him with basic ranch work. The other hands are wary at first, but they come to appreciate having someone who knows both sides of the law, who can spot trouble before it arrives. The security systems Maya installed remain silent guardians of the peace she's helped create. But they're no longer the valley's primary defense. That honor belongs to the newfound unity among the ranchers, the understanding that when they stand together, no outside force can tear them apart. Thomas Cooper still watches from his window, sometimes marveling at how Mia moves with that liquid grace that betrays her former life. But now he sees something else too. The contentment in her smile as she works alongside James, the peace she's found in building something instead of hunting those who would destroy. The Dixon brothers are never seen in Silver Creek Valley again. Sometimes on quiet nights, ranchers gathering at the local diner whisper about sightings in distant counties, about how the once fearsome gang now gives certain territories a wide berth. They say Wade Dixon jumps at shadows these days, haunted, not by what happened that morning, but by what could have happened if the shadow had chosen vengeance instead of mercy. And Mia Mitchell. She continues to build her life with James, protecting their piece of Montana heaven, not with violence, but with vigilance, proving that sometimes the strongest hunters are the ones who choose to stop hunting, who find something worth preserving instead of pursuing. Her legend grows, but it's a different kind of legend now, one that speaks not just of justice served, but of justice tempered with mercy, of strength found in community rather than confrontation. 1 year after the morning that changed Silver Creek Valley forever, Mia Mitchell stands on her front porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and purple. The ranch has thrived under her and James's care, becoming not just a successful business, but a symbol of what can happen when people choose to stand together against intimidation. The valley itself has transformed. Where once there was fear, now there's a sense of community stronger than any the old-timers can remember. Ranchers who used to keep to themselves now gather regularly, sharing resources, supporting each other through hard times. The Dixon brothers' attempt to divide and conquer had achieved the opposite. It had united the valley in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Rattler, now known by his real name Joseph, has become one of their most trusted hands. His knowledge of security, born from years on the wrong side of the law, helps keep the ranch safe in more conventional ways. But more than that, his transformation serves as a living reminder that change is possible, that no one is beyond redemption if they truly want it. The bounty hunter network that Mia spent 15 years building still reaches out occasionally, offering contracts, seeking her expertise. But she politely declines each time, having found something more valuable than any reward money could provide. She's discovered that protecting a community, helping it grow stronger, brings a satisfaction that hunting criminals never could. Thomas Cooper, watching her from his usual spot by the window, sees both versions of Mia now. The legendary shadow who could track anyone anywhere, and the woman who chose to stop tracking, who decided that building something was better than chasing those who would destroy. He understands now that true strength isn't always about who can fight the hardest, but about who can stand the strongest for what they believe in. The story of what happened that morning has become part of local legend, shared around campfires and over coffee at the diner. But the real story, the one that matters most, isn't about how the shadow came out of retirement to face down the Dixon brothers. It's about how one woman's courage inspired an entire community to find its own strength, to stand together against those who would rule through fear. Mia Mitchell's legend continues to grow, but not as the fearsome bounty hunter who could track anyone anywhere. Instead, she's become something else entirely, a symbol of hope, of transformation, of the power that comes from choosing to protect rather than pursue. Her quiet strength, tempered by mercy and wisdom, shows that sometimes the most powerful choice isn't in how we confront our enemies, but in how we help them find a better way. And in the end, that might be the greatest victory of all. If you enjoyed this incredible true story of determination and justice, make sure to join our community of storytellers by subscribing below. Tomorrow, we'll bring you another shocking tale that will leave you absolutely speechless. Mia Mitchell stands at the fence of Silver Creek Ranch's newest pasture, watching a group of young ranch hands learning the trade under Rattler's patient. Oh, guidance! The man who once struck fear into honest folks now takes pride in teaching others how to build rather than destroy. It's a transformation that mirrors the larger changes in Silver Creek Valley, where the shadow of fear has been replaced by the light of community. James joins her at the fence, his hand finding hers as they survey the legacy they've built together. "You know," he says quietly, "sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't chosen to retire here, if you hadn't seen something worth protecting in this old ranch." Mia squeezes his hand, remembering the moment 3 years ago, when she decided to trade her life of hunting for one of building. "The funny thing is," she replies, "I thought I was leaving everything behind, the excitement, the purpose, the sense of making a difference. Turns out I was just finding a different way to do the same thing." In the distance, a truck approaches the ranch. Not so long ago, such a sight would have brought tension. But now it carries one of the neighboring ranchers, coming to discuss plans for the valley's first cooperative grazing program. The Dixon Brothers' attempt to divide and conquer had inadvertently united the community in ways no one could have predicted. The legend of the shadow lives on in whispered stories across the western states, but it's evolved into something more meaningful. Now it's a tale not just of justice served, but of justice tempered with mercy, of strength found in protection rather than pursuit. Mia Mitchell's story has become a beacon for others, seeking their own transformation, proving that it's never too late to choose a different path. As the sun sets over Silver Creek Valley, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Mia reflects on the journey that brought her here. She thinks about Wade Dixon and his brothers, hoping they found their own way to change. She thinks about the countless others she hunted over 15 years, and how different things might have been if they'd had someone to show them another way. "Ready for another adventure?" James asks, nodding toward the approaching truck and the new possibilities it brings. Mia smiles, feeling the weight of her dual legacy, the shadow who hunted down the worst criminals in the West, and the protector who helped build something worth preserving. "Always," she replies, "as long as we're building it together." And so the story continues, not with dramatic confrontations or legendary hunts, but with the quiet, powerful work of building community, of showing others that true strength lies not in making people fear you, but in helping them find their own courage to stand tall. Up next, we've got 2 more incredible stories waiting for you on your screen. Don't miss out on these amazing tales of courage and redemption. Just click and let the journey continue. If you were captivated by this remarkable tale of transformation at Silver Creek Ranch, don't let it be the last story you hear from us. Hit that subscribe button now. We've got incredible stories of courage, redemption, and justice coming your way every single day. Tomorrow's episode will take you deep into another shocking true story that you won't believe until you hear it. Join our community of story lovers who gather here daily for the most gripping real-life tales from across the country. If this story of a quiet rancher's wife who turned out to be the legendary Shadow touched your heart, just wait until you hear what we have in store. From hidden heroes to unexpected twists of fate, our upcoming episodes will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss out on a single story. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and become part of our storytelling family. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our amazing viewers all around the world. See you tomorrow for another unforgettable tale that will leave you absolutely speechless.